Okay.
Who read? Honestly, read. Who read thoroughly?
As far as like between like Genesis, so chapters like 1 through 5, like who actually like thoroughly read through it, and not just one time, like multiple times went back and actually just read it again. One time.
Hmm?
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what
Yeah.
we're gonna do today because I want you
Mhm.
guys to get to like the habit of like reading it because well, like reading it and then questioning what not questioning what you're reading, but like thinking about what you're really reading. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That you might not have asked if you're just like reading it very like fast and reading it like a story. Because I think that what we've found out is that when you read it, you start seeing like things in the first couple of like chapters that you can then start to like have a light bulb or put links to like
Mhm.
in other harder chapters, harder
Yeah.
books.
And I think this would actually be good though too, just because like I think we covered like a lot of like just vocab words, right? And we were just kind of like going forward and forward and forward, and a lot of times we never went back and just kind of said, let's go back and read everything just to make sure we all kind of understand what that means and how does it actually like all the webs start to kind of come together a little bit better. So we're gonna kind of like camp here a little bit more as far as start trying to read. Hopefully today chapters 1, 2, and we'll see what gets to 3. We'll see how that goes. And then I'll just probably just share mine if you guys don't, whenever you guys don't have your Bibles, whatever. I'll just share like my notes that I had, and then we kind of go from there. Like on mine, I pretty much have, and I'll show you guys. Let's see. On mine, I actually had like I just put down like a legend. Only reason why is because I had like certain things highlighted, like so where like Elohim said it was God, or just even like random things as far as trying to just kind of go from there. So we'll pretty much start from there, and then we'll go. Yep. So go
We'll
ahead.
start with the prayer. So if
Yep.
everybody bows their heads real quick, and let's just pray. Padre nuestro que estás en los cielos, gracias por esta oportunidad que nos has dado de poder reunirnos aquí en este lugar, Señor, y aprender más de tu palabra, Señor, aprender más de ti y poder saber cómo escudriñarla, Señor, y poder acercarnos más a ti, porque si no la leemos todos los días o si no la leemos en sí, no nos estamos acercando a ti, sino alejándonos más de ti. Ponemos este servicio o este estudio bíblico a tus manos, Señor, y que sea fortaleza y sea beneficio para nuestras vidas. En nombre de Cristo Jesús, amén.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll probably just start off with chapter 1, and we'll just kind of go from there. Okay, so you guys ready? Can you guys see that? Yeah. Okay. So here we go. Chapter 1, the beginning. Right. So we said, in the beginning, Elohim. So like I said, I changed mine from God to pretty much Elohim. Created the heavens and the earth. Verse 2. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the spirit of Elohim was hovering over the waters. Verse 3. And Elohim said, let there be light, and there was light. Elohim said, Elohim saw the light and was good. And he separated the light from the darkness. Verse 5. Elohim called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, and there was the first day.
Is everybody understanding so far what happened?
You guys remember like Daisy's little picture she had as far as like all the little things that was going on? So now we're kind of going back and we're starting to see that a little more. So I have everything kind of sectioned off as far as what day we're going to be on. So that's the end of day 1. Verse 6. And Elohim said, let there be a vault between the waters to separate the water from water. So Elohim made a vault and separated the water under the vault from the water above it. And it was so. Elohim called the vault sky, and there was evening, and there was morning, and that's the second day. So that's pretty much the end of as far as day 2. So here we go.
Anybody have anything on this one? Any comments? Anything that you didn't understand but you understand now? You have something to say? Okay.
All right. Verse 9. And Elohim said, let the water under the sky be gathered to one place, and let the dry ground appear. And it was so. Elohim called the dry ground land, and gathered the waters he called seas. And Elohim saw that it was good. Elohim said, let the land produce vegetation, seed-bearing plants, trees, and the land that bear fruit with the seed in it. According to their various kinds, it was so. And it was so. The land produced vegetation, plants bearing seeds according to their kinds, and trees bearing fruit with the seed and according to their kinds. And Elohim saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, and it was day 3. So this is what Daisy was talking about before, where she was trying to say, like God had pretty much commanded the land to actually create the trees and the bushes and everything else as far as the seed bearings and to pretty much make it grow. You guys remember that, where it's pretty much like God said pretty much the land to do the work, so that way it came from the ground up, right? So now we're going to go to day 3, or the beginning of day 4. So, and Elohim said, let there be lights in the vault and the sky, separate the day from the night, and let them serve as signs to mark sacred times and the days and years. And let them be lights in the vaults for the skies to give light on the earth. And it was so. Elohim made 2 great lights, and great lights to govern the day, and a lesser light to govern the night. He also made the stars. The stars. Elohim set them in the vault of the sky and give light, and to give light on the earth, and govern the day and the night, and separate light from darkness. And Elohim saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, and the 4th day. All right, so here we go. And verse 20. And Elohim said, let the water teem the living creatures, let the birds fly above earth across the vault of the sky. So Elohim created the great creatures of the sea and every living thing that which the waters teem, and that moves about in it, according to their kinds, and every winged bird according to its kind. And Elohim saw that it was good. Elohim blessed them and said, be fruitful and increase in number, and fill the waters and the seas, and let the birds increase on the earth. And there was evening, and there was morning, and it was the 5th day. I think this is kind of like for this one, I'm kind of stop for a second. It's because right here, when he says, be fruitful and increase numbers and fill the waters and the seas, what other thing can be said right there? Like, can you guys think of, what is God trying to tell them to do? And he does it to us later on as well. So, and if you guys don't know, it's okay. So what I'm trying to say on this one is pretty much it's the first time where you see right here on verse 22, Elohim blessed them. He's giving blessing pretty much to the creatures to multiply and fill the earth of every kind, right? So we're going to see that same thing later on. So right away, we're starting to see pretty much like we talked about last time as far as Elohim's attributes to see what he is as far as God, right? Right there is already pretty much saying blessing. So verse 24. And Elohim said, let the land produce living creatures according to their kinds, the livestock, and the creatures that move along the ground, and the wild animals each according to its kind, and it was so. Elohim made the wild animals according to their kinds, to the livestock according to their kinds, and the creatures that move along the ground according to their kind. And Elohim saw that it was good. Then Elohim said, let us make mankind in our image and our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the seas and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and all the wild animals, and over all the creatures that move along the ground. So Elohim created mankind in his own image. In the image of Elohim, he created them. Male and female, he created them. Elohim blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and increase in the numbers. Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, and over every living creature that moves on the ground. So it's kind of like we talked about earlier. I said on verse 22, you're seeing that same blessing again from pretty much the animals on the land to pretty much now with humans. So it's like the first pretty much thing that God tells us to do is pretty much say, be fruitful, right? As far as I'm blessing you with this land, with this place, own it, take over it, be happy with it, make it whatever it is that's yours, right? And so right away we're told to do those things. One is to be pretty much so he's blessing us to be fruitful, but the other thing is pretty much to rule over those animals, as we talked about last time, as far as I think it was last week. All right, so verse 29. Then Elohim said, I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it, they will be yours for food. And to all the beasts of the earth, and all the birds in the sky, and all the creatures that move along the ground, everything that has breath of life in it, I give you every green plant for food. And it was so. And Elohim saw that all he had made, and it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, and it's the 6th day. So far we pretty much have 6 different days, and every single day it's pretty much a different thing we have to pretty much do, right? So far we good. So that's all chapter 1 right there. So we saw, was it 2 different parts of blessings?
It doesn't stop. It keeps going.
Yeah, for sure it keeps going, but that's where like the pause is right there. But does that make sense so far for all you guys? Okay.
Okay, so just to stomp you guys, because I was stomped, and I was still stomped. Why does it say, why does 26 say, then God said, let us, and I think we were talking about this today, let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky. And then verse 27, it goes from being singular, or plural to being singular. And God created mankind in his image. So why is it that verse 26 says, let us make mankind in our image, but then in verse 27 he said in his own image?
Talking to the Spirit and Jesus.
Oh, you asked a question. I was
no, I'm just saying, like, I don't know if anybody else saw that.
I mean, Daisy was on it for probably like at least like 30, 40 minutes. You were on there.
So I just wanted to see if anybody else had any insight. So you're saying how? Say it again.
He was talking to the Spirit and Jesus.
So it's like, then God said, let us. So he's talking to. So he's in a room, per se, or in a place with other.
Pretty much like the Elohim is what that's what pretty much you're saying as far as like
Yeah.
in that little circle that they have right there, right? He's pretty much talking to them saying, hey, let us all, right, gather and let us make them in our image, right? That's what you're saying as far as like it's plural, or you're just saying that he's only talking to like.
So let's say, because us, we have a conscience.
Sure.
We have a body.
Mhm.
It's like something like that. My dad said it. And then, do you talk to yourself, like in your head?
Oh yeah, all the time.
It's like that.
Yeah.
So he's
Oh, so that's how
saying
you
then
see it.
us, like me, my mind, whatever.
Mm.
So that's one way to see it.
Mm.
You get it.
Because you're saying pretty much like I think that's what you're saying, right? As far as like with the Trinity, right? You're saying pretty much God is in 3 persons. Therefore, he's pretty much talking to himself in those 3 persons and saying, "Let's us, as far as us 3, to get together and pretty much make mankind in our image." That's what you're saying? Okay.
So then why did he go to singular in verse 27?
Because I mean, I think from there, because obviously it still doesn't say Yahweh, right? It doesn't say Lord or anything else like that. So I think what he was trying to say on that one is that, he's obviously the ruler, right, when it comes to pretty much the spiritual side of it, right, as we talked about last time. And so maybe he's just trying to say, like, hey, I'm the one in charge of this area. Now let's make human be in charge of their own area. So it goes from like 3 to just 1 by himself.
I'm gonna keep looking.
Yeah, keep going. Yeah, for sure. Yep.
Because I'm stuck on why he's saying in our image and then in his own image.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
I got a thought.
Yeah, go for it.
Where is it? Oh, in 20, it says, and Elohim said, let the
Jeez.
let the water teem, right?
Yeah.
With living creatures, and let birds fly above the earth across the vault of the sky. Before, it said he called the vault the sky, and
Right.
then it says the vault of the sky.
That's where I was also stuck in too.
Yeah. So I was like,
Did you find anything? No. I haven't either. But that's another one I'm stuck in. It's like, well, if he called it sky, why does he call it? Yeah. Remember I asked you too?
Yep.
So go back up.
It's right there. You talking about on verse 15? Yeah. It says, "Let them and let the lights be in the vault of the sky to give light on the earth," and it was before it. Yeah, sure. So down right here. Up here then when it first starts it.
Go back. Go back. Go back to 15. Where is it?
That's what I was telling you. It's over here. That's right. There's another section with vault.
Yes, yes.
Called the vault of the sky.
And then
Like if you would explain.
and then right here. Right here. Let there be lights in the vault of the sky. So is it sky of the sky? That's where I was stuck on. So that's why I also want to like get y'all's input and where you guys are also stuck, so that we can maybe like all together kind of like
Put our heads
ask
together.
questions and
Yeah.
research. So that's one I also had. So it's that one, and then the why is it plural and then singular? So anybody else had anything like that everybody understood everything?
I have questions
For later? Okay.
That's fine.
Okay, so then we're good with this one then.
Okay. I think that's why we're trying to read it too, because I think a lot of times we kind of like pass over a lot of the things, and we just kind of said, yeah, it's good to go. But I think there's still things that we're all just trying to like figure out still that doesn't really make sense to us, and we're just trying to make sure. And then a lot of it's just because the way it was written in the very beginning, we talked about before, it was all written in Hebrew, and I think back then they all understood it probably either fairly well or if not better than us for sure. And so right now, it's already been translated numerous amount of times. Exactly right. Yeah, probably. I mean, it's not even that. I think it's kind of what we talked about before, like where one word can have 4 different interpretations, right? And so a lot of times they might plug in the word that makes sense for them, and they might miss out on like a better opportunity that they actually could have grabbed on, and it might make it easier for us instead. So I think it's kind of like, what was it? I forgot what word it was, but there was one where they actually like instead of actually making it like spirit, they changed it to something else. And it kind of like just took away from it. I'll find it later on. I'll show you guys what I'm talking about. It's but we're gonna go from there. It's like going to like King James and then going to like New American Standard. A lot of it, all the different types of words that they use. I mean, it's fairly close, so it's kind of weird. Yep. Good.
Yeah, I'll read chapter 2.
Yeah, go for it.
Thus the heavens and the earth were complete in all their vast array. I don't know which version you have though.
It's the same. You're good so far. It's okay.
By the seventh day, God had finished the work he had been doing. So on the seventh day, he rested from all his work. Then God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it he rested from all the work of creating that he had done. Yes.
There's a lot of time
Mm-hmm.
is it a lot of time from day 7 to like chapter 2 that passed by?
Is that what you think? When you read it, is that how you...
It's not a right or wrong answer. We're just
it's
asking.
a question,
And that's why I was asking, because every time I read Genesis, I would read it like a story. Like, okay, here's the beginning, here's the middle, and then here's the end. But then it doesn't make, to me, after reading it again, I was like, why is it that men's being created on chapter 2? And why is it that there's no water when the beginning it said that there was water?
It says there's no water.
Yeah, because I mean, like, so when you yeah, go ahead, Daisy.
So I'll read it real quick. So this is the account of the heavens and the earth when they were created, when the Lord God made the earth and the heavens. Now no shrubs had yet appeared on the earth, and no plants had yet sprung up, for the Lord God had not set rain on the earth, and there was no one to work the ground. So why is it that it said that there was no shrubs and there was no water, but yet in chapter 1 it's saying
It starts off with pretty much like,
there's so much water?
yeah, there's
Remember
the spirit over the water as far as the darkness. So I think what Daisy's trying to say is like in the Bible, a lot of times it's going to give us like these comparisons a lot of times. And it's either kind of like we just kind of skim over it, kind of like no big deal, or we can say, okay, chapter 1, it says you start with water, and then you actually make land, and then you actually start to pretty much do the skies and everything. So it's kind of like, does life come from water? Or do you start with chapter 2 that says you start with land, and then you get water, and then everything gets separated? It's kind of like, or does actually life come from just ground as far as just from the beginning?
What do you guys have? Any ideas? I mean, I said this question as just kind of like to get your guys' brains thinking.
Mm.
Did anybody think about it when you were reading it? No?
That's our question.
Yeah, it is. And I think,
Daniel?
go ahead.
Diana? No? Say the question? So let's go back to verse 1 real quick, or chapter 1, verse 1. God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep. And remember, deep is like chaotic waters.
Mm-hmm.
And the spirit of Elohim was hovering over the waters. So right here it's saying that there's waters. But if you go to verse chapter 2, it says, this is the account of the heavens and the earth. And there was created,
Mm-hmm.
no shrubs had yet appeared on the earth, and no plants had yet sprung up from for Elohim had not sent rain on the earth, and there was no one to work the ground.
But it didn't say there was any sun.
Hmm?
It didn't say there was some water. It said there was no rain.
There's no rain.
Yeah, but you start off with pretty much like dry land. You're starting off with dry land where it's saying there's dry land, nobody to work the crops yet, and he hasn't brought down rain on the land yet. And you already start with pretty much shrubs and everything else too. So you're kind of getting an indication right there as far as if we go back, when did God create, as far as what day was it that he pretty much made the land grow pretty much the trees and shrubs and everything else.
No.
It's okay. It's not like this. We're trying to trick you guys or anything like that. What we're just trying to say is kind of like, why not start chapter 2 with saying there was water? Because chapter 2 is more like it gets into the detail, right? And we start to figure out, okay, we know in chapter 1 man was created. Now chapter 2, let's talk more about man. Let's talk about more about what's actually going on in all those little details as far as every single day. So why not start chapter 2 with saying, okay, there was water, and then God came over here and pretty much separated everything and pretty much made land, and everything was good, and everything was fine. Why start off with that pretty much beginning? And it's not to trick people. Go ahead.
Maybe the water, everything had dried. No, that's what I'm.
It's getting close.
Everything had dried. He did it like a period of time after he created everything. So maybe the water evaporated. It
Close.
dried.
Okay. Is that where you're?
No.
That's where I'm heading.
Yeah, that's what.
Can-
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so later on, it says that he separated. Wait,
Go
hold
back
on.
to chapter 1.
No, it's right there.
Where?
It's like, where is it? I just saw it.
Right here.
Oh, there you go. A river watering the garden flowed from Eden. From there was separated into 4 headwaters. So maybe they were all like it wasn't in the land yet.
What was it?
The water. So like it was separated from the.
Can I say something? Can I say something?
Yeah.
Wait, since she's at something.
Wait, that makes sense.
Can I say something?
So if you keep reading, it later says that there's like a mist that rises from the ground,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that the waters that's not present is the chaos water. And later on, he pretty much uses rain to destroy the world, pretty much.
Mm.
I think Daniel wanted to say something too.
No, it's fine.
No, go ahead.
No, it's good. He kind of took my word.
Oh, okay.
Maybe in your words, what is it?
I mean that what he said, and also I was thinking maybe the water to maintain the garden, everything living in it, and then the water just ran out.
That's it earlier too. Yeah.
You have your own thoughts too?
Yeah, I mean, I have my own, but go ahead.
Okay, so my thoughts, the way that I thought of chapter 2 is, go back to chapter 1. This is how I saw it. If you go back, so it starts off with like, there's a lot of water, and then that's why I was saying that you guys were pretty close. It's like, the way that I was thinking, it's like, he separated the waters from here and the waters from up there. And then if you go to day 4,
Oh, that's the end of day 4.
it's all right.
It's pretty much right here. This is the beginning of it.
Yeah, right here. So I think of chapter 2 as like a parentheses, or like a enclosed up view of like right here. that this is where there's dry land, and so there's no water.
That's what I was like saying. Like
Mm.
it wasn't in the land, like or mixed with the land.
Yeah. So I think.
Yeah.
So I think chapter 2 is like right around here. Yeah. So he created. So there's like separation of he's organizing, right? So I think in my mind I was like, okay, he separated the waters, and now there's just like what do you do when like the water dries up? Like there's just nothing there. Like it's just land. So that's what I thought of it, and that's why there was no shrubs until like day 4, right? When he told it to. So I think
That's-
it's like
yeah.
a parentheses in here, and that's why there's in my mind. That's how I saw it.
Yeah, because I guess what you're saying pretty much is like on chapter 1, you're gonna have those little like random like inputs that go into random verses that might skip pretty much different steps. It's not, and it's not that like the other steps are not important. It's just trying to say we're here in this timeline. Pretty much is what you're saying.
Yeah, that's
Mm.
where I see chapter 2 being like this is the order,
Mhm.
but then within that order, there's this story that God wants to point out right there where there was no water in the land, and so then begins chapter 2.
Go ahead.
What? Makes sense. That's how I saw it. Does that kind of help too?
So he talks about 7 days,
Uh-huh.
Mm.
but then he takes it back like
Yeah. And that's why he
Yeah.
says, that's why I always got confused because I was like, wait, he already created man on day 6, right?
Mm-hmm.
So why is it that in chapter 2 he's recreating him again? But it's because he's going
More in depth.
more in depth.
Yeah.
How he does that make sense?
Yeah. Because it doesn't say day 8 or something.
Right. It doesn't say day 8, like kind of like, oh, and the next day this is what's happening. It's just pretty much saying, yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't say he created.
Right, because day 7 he was done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's up?
do you know why he does that?
Do we know why?
Yeah.
No.
It's just a narration. I think it's more to see if you're paying attention, I guess.
No, but I mean, I think it's just the way that they wanted to rearrange it is like,
Yeah.
here's the days that God created, and now here's the story of how man was created.
I have something to say.
Mm.
Wait, go back to 1.
Which one? One?
Okay, what I'm understanding is that Daisy said
So Daisy was talking about
That-
right here.
no. Like, my question is, did he form everything in 1 day, or was it 7 days? Like, what do you mean with? Where's the part where it says on chapter 1 that he created men? Besides, I mean, not chapter 1. Wait, go back to the next one.
To chapter 2?
Chapter 2.
Yeah.
Or where did he create him?
Wait, yeah, no. Where did he create him?
So keep going. So let me read.
Like,
It's
what
right.
my question is, where, like,
He formed a man from the dust. of the
okay,
ground.
but then it mentions it. So what you're saying is that there was a day where he created man, but then there's just an additional chapter explaining
The details.
the details. But
Exactly
it's not
right.
like he formed. Just forget it. I don't even know what to say.
That's
it
cool.
don't make sense.
Because that's why that's what
Yeah.
I'm saying. Like reading it multiple times, I still was confused
Mm-hmm.
why chapter 1 had or mentioned that man was created, and then in chapter 2 it's saying it again. That's why I got confused. I don't know if anybody else did, but I did.
Like, do you guys understand what Daisy's trying to say? Just to make sure. So it's pretty much like,
Yeah, I don't want to confuse you guys.
yeah, because I think that's where it's kind of going a little bit. No, that's fine. Yeah. So I think it's just pretty much just like you have, so pretty much in chapter 1, it's kind of like what we did in the beginning when we started talking about Genesis, and we were saying how many movements was in Genesis, right? And we said there's 4 different movements we're going to talk about, and every single one had 3 different parts in a movement. And then we started saying, okay, let's talk about it, right? That's what's God doing the same thing. God's saying, here's a summary of what's happening in those days, and like from day 1 to 7. Now in chapter 2, like maybe we're going to skip different verses, but we're going to say, let's go back and revisit day 2. Let's go back and revisit day 6. Let's go back and revisit day 4, whatever. He's just going back and trying to tell us, like, hey, I pretty much told you really quickly, this is what I did, but here's a little bit more detail of what I really did in that time frame. This is how I actually made man from the actual ground, as far as the dust from the ground. This is how actually I pretty much created the skies, or what I did with the animals, like I'm gonna show you exactly how I did that in chapter 2. Chapter 1 is just a quick summary of what he did. Does that make sense? Okay. Are you guys sure? Matthew, are you sure?
Yeah, it's kind of like
Okay. Repeat it back, Matthew. Just kidding, Matthew. Just kidding.
the slide that Daisy did on last Friday, the one with the arrows.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's kind of like.
Yeah, like she has like the overall summary
Mhm.
of what's going on. Now we're gonna dive into those specific days and see what's happening. So, are you guys good? I think you did a good thing just to kind of stop and let's just before we start reading into chapter 2, how we're gonna start getting into it.
Somebody asked a question.
Oh, did they? Oh, we already got lost. My bad. Yeah, probably. He had his hand like this.
Okay, so then,
Yeah, that's about right.
now the Lord God had planted a garden. Okay, sorry.
Go back to verse 5.
Now no shrubs had yet appeared on the earth, and no plant had yet sprung up, for the Lord God had not sent rain on the earth, and there was no one to work the ground. So that's why there's no water, right? So then, and there's the only way that plants will ever grow is with water from the sky. But since there wasn't, they're coming up from the stream. Yes, Daniel?
I have a question. So, before day 7, you know how it just says Elohim?
Yeah.
So why in day 7 it says Yahweh Elohim?
So do you remember what?
So
So you know how Elohim can mean more than like the whole group of spiritual beings. So
Mhm.
they're talking about God specifically.
Like that's his name.
but like they say Elohim created the earth in day 1.
I know, but
Mhm.
you know what they mean.
It's all good. I think in that one, it's kind of like certain things in the Bible is actually trying to make you just think, kind of like what you guys are saying right now. It's like, why say Elohim as far as God in the beginning when we're talking about just like a spiritual creature? I think also what it's trying to do is try and see if you're paying attention to what does that really mean, right? And I think also the Bible does is pretty much, it gives us enough information in the beginning just to kind of say, this is what's pretty much happening, right? So instead of saying like, here's the main character of what's kind of going on, it's trying to say, here's an overall picture of kind of what we're talking about. Spiritual beings created the earth, whatever you want to say. But then let's get more specific. In chapter 2, we finally see God's actual name. As far as instead of the title of God, we're seeing his name. So it's kind of like we talked about before. Chapter 1 is just a summary. Chapter 2, let's get more specific. What's his actual name? Yahweh. You know what I'm saying?
Interesting. How do you feel about that?
Point 1 for Chris. Thank you.
Okay, so but streams came up from the earth and watered the whole surface of the ground. Then the Lord God formed a man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostril the breath of life, and the man became a living being. Now the Lord God had planted a garden in the east. So another thing to remember to always east, yeah.
Yeah.
Know your locations because they're important in other stories too. So here the garden is on the east.
Because I think it wouldn't just tell you it's east for no reason. It's not going to say, oh, here's a location. All right, don't worry about it. Let's keep going. It's going to say it's a specific reason why it's telling you why it's there. What, Eric? Yeah, I know it.
East
It's okay.
in Eden. No, okay. No, I'll come back to that.
Sure.
And there he planted the man he had formed. The Lord God made all kinds of trees grow out of the ground, trees that were pleasing to the eyes and good for food. In the middle of the garden there were tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. A river watering the garden flowed from Eden. From there it was separated into 4 headwaters. The name of the first is Pishon.
Mm-hmm.
I lost my spot. It winds through the entire land of Havilah, where there is gold. The gold of the land is good, aromatic resin, and onyx are also there. The name of the second river is the
Gihon.
Gihon. It winds through the entire land of Cush. The name of the third river is the Tigris.
Tigris.
It runs along the east side of Ashur, and the fourth river is the Euphrates.
So, hold on, give me a second. So do you guys know, so back in pretty much verse 9, right? So since we're kind of going in order real quick, do you guys know the difference between the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil?
I always thought it was 3 trees. I don't know.
You thought it was what?
3 trees.
3 trees? Oh, because like good and evil is like 2 different trees?
I thought, yeah, good and
Mm.
evil was the 2 trees, and then yeah.
Yeah, I got you. But do you guys know? So let me just kind of pick on one of you guys. So what is the tree?
I messed you up.
That's what he said, right? So he pretty much, let's go back to, verse 9. So it says, Yahweh Elohim made all kinds of trees grow up from the ground. So he pretty much made a ton of trees everywhere, right? He told the land to do it, right? Go for it. Go for it.
I'm sorry. See, I shouldn't make these comments.
Because she said 3 trees, but like that's what she thought.
That's what she thought. That's not 3 trees. No.
There's no.
No, that's not 3 trees.
I'll give me your opinion.
No. There's tons of trees, and then there's 2 main trees that we're talking about that he planted.
I'm over here looking at where it said 3.
Yeah. Oh, no. That's just thing. Okay.
She has something to say.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'm waiting.
The tree of good and evil is the one that makes us know good and evil. And
Okay.
then the tree of life is where we take the word from the God or God's spirit into
Okay.
our lives.
Okay.
If I put it that way. Yeah.
That's fine. Yeah. Anybody else have anything as far as what their interpretation of it is?
I'll just get mine.
Yeah, go for it. That's fine.
The same thing, like the good and evil is pretty much you're trying to. In my mind, is like you're trying to make choices yourself of what's good and bad.
Mm.
And then where's the one? The tree of life is just. I don't know, just life. Like eternal life is how I was.
Okay. Yeah. So I mean, anybody else having one? Eric, somebody pass the microphone to Eric.
I feel like he put the tree there so like whenever we were ready or something, to like let us eat it, the tree of good and evil.
Hmm.
Then later on, join him in heaven.
Okay. Okay. So we'll go from there. Go ahead, Daniel.
There's only one tree of life, right?
Yes.
Oh. Okay, never mind. Bye.
Because I was thinking for a little bit, I was thinking there was a tree of good and a
Yes.
tree of evil.
That's what I thought too.
Just 2 trees. That's one tree, yes, by itself. Good and evil is together.
There's no.
Because you
There's
can't have
only
good
2
without evil. They
trees,
have to
you
come together
guys.
because it's kind of perception.
There's
There's no 3 trees.
There's
No
only
3 trees.
2.
2 trees.
That's what I was saying.
2 trees.
May I repeat? There's only 2 trees, you guys. Only 2.
Yeah.
So there's only 2 trees.
Daisy, bro.
2 trees.
No, it's not you. It's
2.
no, yeah, for sure.
trees.
Nothing wrong.
That's how I saw it too. Good and evil was.
good and evil.
Good.
There's 2 trees.
Yeah.
But then
No.
in my moment of
Two
moment of
trees.
confusion where you mentioned 3 trees, that's where I was like, oh wait, there's good and evil, and there's what middle, like
2 trees.
Oh, no.
Only-
Yeah.
Just to clarify.
2 trees.
Never mind. Sorry, you were gonna say something?
No, I keep hitting 2 trees.
So just to clarify, 2 trees. One is
Tree of life.
tree of life,
And then the good and the bad.
and good and evil.
2 trees. Yep.
Just 2.
Yep. Or else it would have been like tree of life, the tree of good, and the tree of evil. But because I mean, you can see, I mean, they're putting the tree in front of it. It's not just saying tree. You know what I mean? That's what the Bible's trying to separate it out that way for us, so we can pretty much have a better grasp of it. So, Diana, you got something?
You had something. Daniel had something.
Okay, that's
And I was just gonna say, if y'all confused, just remember that the tree of good and evil is what Eve ate.
what
Is
Eve.
What Eve ate.
It doesn't. No, we'll get to it in a minute later on. Okay, so let's go back real quick just for a second. So it says right here, right, as far as in verse 9, it says, he made all countries, and it says, the trees were pleasing to the eye for good, and good for food. So it pretty much says, all the trees were good for food, right? But later on it says, only one tree you can't eat from, right? That's it, only one. So it even says, this tree of life that we're talking about right here, you can eat from it. And what the tree of life is, go ahead. Yeah, go for it.
Can you no? Can you highlight the pink in another color? Like I don't know if you can change it. I can't read it.
I don't think I can change it from here. Yeah. So, pretty much on that one, I want to try and get to as far as the tree of life. Oh, give me a second, Dane. So, the tree of life, what that represents is actual like God's actual life, His presence. That's Him right there. And it's kind of like when you look at a pyramid and you say like the taller it gets, the closer you get as far as up high in the sky, and it takes longer, whatever. It's the same thing with this tree. The higher you get on this tree, the more God's presence is actually there. And in the tree of life. Yes, exactly right. So, and what they talk about in this tree is pretty much say if you were to put them both next to each other, right? The tree, they both are very, like, you could say, most beautiful trees out there, right? It's not to say one looks really bad and one looks really good. They're both look amazing, right? And you can say, you can probably maybe picture like a pretty much a tree that's like looks all gold and just really bright and it has kind of like lights in it or something like that. They look completely different than any other tree out there, right? But one tree is further away than the other. So which tree would be closer and which tree would be further away?
I think good and evil would be closer.
Good and evil would be closer?
Yeah.
Diana, you
because-
got one?
Oh.
Okay. Eric?
Proximity?
It's in like the Bible study notes. Yeah. I'll get back to you on that one. Yeah. And so pretty much, so that's what goes back when we start talking about pretty much chapter 3 later on as far as the fall, right? Is to figure out if one's closer, does that mean it's easier to get to? And is that another reason why something happens? Or is it just saying, I put this in front of you to tempt you? Probably not. But we talked about that in James, remember, as far as temptation versus tribulation, as far as trials and everything else. God won't tempt you, right?
I wanted to say something.
Sure.
So for him, the temptation already exists within him.
So that's a good point. So Daisy and I were talking about that earlier too, which was pretty much when we start reading as far as in chapter 3, because we're kind of getting a little bit ahead of ourselves now. But in chapter 3, when we start reading about it, it doesn't just say like, oh, there was evil. Evil's already around, right? The serpents was around the whole time. And it kind of goes back to even for us. It's like, how do you know pretty much there's good and evil? Even for right now in your day-to-day life, as far as every hour, every minute, how do you know evil's around? It's always around regardless. And it's not that God's trying to tempt you. It's so much as how much can you build up your pretty much mental fortitude to not succumb to those things. And that's what the Bible helps us out with, is to build our foundation, kind of like the pastor's always talking about. If you don't have a foundation, you're going to fall to it. But we're kind of getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. But I just want to talk about pretty much the trees. Go ahead. Daniel? Okay. There you go. Awesome. The microphone.
So that's why he put the tree there of good and evil, so like we can know what's bad and what's good.
No, so
not as a temptation
Sure.
for us to like.
I think it's kind of like as a parent, right? So like if you look at God as far as our Father, right? He's not trying to tell us to do things to tempt us. He's trying to tell us, sorry? Yeah, to fail. A lot of times what he's trying to do is just say, I want to see if you're actually going to be with me on this one, right? Are you actually going to listen to everything I'm going to say? Because I just made you. Let's see where you're going to be capable. I gave you the option for choices for everything. And later on, as far as we're going to read in a little bit, it's going to say, what is his first commandment to the humans? Right? His first commandment that he pretty much says is, and we'll get there in a minute. So let's not get too much ahead of ourselves. We'll keep back to reading again. But I just wanted you guys to know as far as the difference between the tree of life and the tree of good and evil. Now that we know that it's not 3 trees, it's just 2 trees. Thanks, Daisy. You helped everybody else out too on that one. So now we're a little bit better now as far as on the tree part. Okay, so let's keep going.
So just something I noticed when I was reading, I don't know if you guys did. Verse 8, it says, now the Lord God had planted a garden.
Yep.
In the east,
Mm-hmm.
in Eden. So it's like, I guess I'm thinking like Eden, and then within Eden there's a garden to the
East. Yep, that way. Yep.
So that means that.
Me? What do you mean?
See, in my mind, I
Oh,
always
east and west?
thought-
I don't know. Just easy, I guess.
But in my mind, I always thought that the garden was like all of Eden.
But it wasn't. It was just a certain spot of it. That's pretty much kind of like when you go like.
Did anybody else think of that, or just right now?
I have a question.
Go for it.
I always thought the same thing as you because it says the Garden of Eden. So I just picture a garden like the whole
Mm-hmm.
thing.
Nope.
You just now noticed it too?
Okay, my question. I don't know if I'm ahead of or like
That's fine.
off the topic, but when I'm sorry, Eric, I feel so bad. When God made the world,
Mhm.
I'm trying to understand if Eden was here, like in this world we're living in, or was there a spiritual world? But then, like, why would God be telling us, like, oh yeah, on this day I made this, I made that, I made like literally everything we have right now.
Sure.
But then, like, oh, there's this beautiful garden out of nowhere. Like, it has everything we know we have already, but it's like,
Perfect.
I mean, perfect and like I don't want to say magical because magical's not the thing, but like you picture fairy tales and there's like this like
Sure.
magical pretty place and
Yeah.
like so. I mean, is it Eden that he's describing or is it our world that he's describing?
So how did you come up with
The question?
Yeah.
Because I actually always wondered that because I've heard people say like, oh no, Eden is. I want to say George told me it was a spiritual place. He probably made it up. I don't know. But
But it's the people who are not that know the story that come up with these questions that you're just like,
yeah, and then it was probably him. I don't know, but no, what I'm saying. Okay. Oh, I came up with it right now because of his little comment, which is probably he was probably playing or something, but also because the East. So
Mhm.
like, I was like, okay, so it's not the little magical place out of here. Is it the world, and is it the east of our world?
Yep.
Or
So
but she had something.
I was gonna.
Sorry, Christian.
that's fine. No worries.
I'm gonna add to what Brandon said. 'Cause
Sure.
To the point of is it a spiritual place? Because it says later on. I'm sorry, but
Right.
they get exiled from the garden,
Right.
and then they have to build up their home. And
Their own. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So they could have been sent from the spiritual place to over here, so they can start building their home.
But then, sorry, and I think I'm ahead already. But then, adding to yours, we're gonna go back and forward. Adding to where she said that they were thrown. I'm over here imagining that they like fell from heaven or something, but it's probably not that.
Mm.
But you see how immediately after she ate from the fruit that was already in Eden,
Mm-hmm.
Eve started. Well, both of them they started to feel shame, covering
Right.
themselves and stuff. So like, I mean, you started to feel shame in Eden. So like.
Right.
Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, yeah.
Like you started to feel
No, I
all
know
the
what you mean.
like the type. You started to feel the
Ready.
feelings of Earth in
Yeah.
Eden.
Yep.
So yeah, like so what in Eden? Like all of a sudden,
Yeah.
y'all are
So-
sinners. Like get out of here.
So that's pretty much. Go ahead. Yeah. No, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah, you guys. I'm going to remember all these questions and start answering them.
You know how Satan became Satan? Because he was like this great warrior in heaven, but then he became prideful, and he was in heaven.
Right.
Like he had access to everything.
Right.
But then he became prideful.
Right.
So they could have still been in a spiritual place.
Right. So let me answer that before you guys get. Eric has one. Oh, go ahead. You take your time. I didn't even see you. yeah.
No, I just
I got it.
I also read that like it was the closest thing we were like. I think you said it too. Like
Yeah.
it was the closest thing we had to being with God.
Right.
So, but I don't know about the spiritual place or anything like that.
Yeah. So let me answer all of them. That we pretty much go from there, right? Yeah. I think we're good now, right? So let's start from there, right? So you guys are pretty much saying. No, yeah, it's good because I think it kind of it starts to get your brain to kind of start working a little bit more too. I think so. Let's say, for instance, it is a spiritual place, right? Okay, so if it's a spiritual place, where would it be at, right? Mostly humans are where? Here on Earth, right? They made pretty much Adam from the ground, so it's not like they're like in some place above. But we'll say yes, it's a spiritual place, but on Earth, right? So it's a spiritual place on Earth, not over here in North America, obviously. Over there, as far as in the Middle East. Yeah, man. I don't know about that. But so let's say pretty much it's over there in the Middle East. We saw pretty much where Jerusalem is at and where Israel and all that stuff as far as how that looks later on, right? So So what we're saying pretty much at the beginning is that it was a spiritual place. God was there. God's presence, his life, the tree was there that they can pretty much take from. They can eat that tree as far as like the apples or whatever the fruit that came out of it. They can eat from it and just learn so much more about God's pretty much life, right? But later on, we said before, it's that it is a spiritual place, but whenever they bring shame, like you guys said, as far as the word shame, when they bring shame, it's no longer pure. It's not pure anymore. So is it really a spiritual place? Yes, until human bring their own sin, their own chaos. And that's what's pretty much talking about before, where's evil at all the time? And so because they bring that, they're cast out. And they can no longer participate in the most spiritual thing. The closest thing to God that they actually had was right there, the tree that they can go walk towards and be with him, right? And if they had that and they partake of something that they weren't supposed to, why should they still be there? And so they had to be castigated out. They had to pretty much be shunned out of that place to say, you're not worthy enough to be here, right? So that's pretty much where it's at. So if that answered all your guys' questions, it's pretty much where was pretty much Adam created from the ground. If God's making everything in the very beginning, before human pretty much put their imprint as far as what they decide to be good and evil on the world, everything is pure that God makes. And yes, in a place as far as the whole world where it's at, he decides to say, I'm going to try to make man in this one place that I call Eden. I'm going to make him in I don't really care about everything that's going on in the world. I want to just make sure, and right now we're talking about pretty much in chapter, between 5 and 10, whatever you're talking about, that I'm only going to talk about this one place for the time being right now, which is I want to concentrate on where we're at, which is Eden, the garden, the trees to the east, and we're just pretty much seeing what's happening there. Does that make sense? Okay, cool. So let's go on to verse 15, Daisy.
Yeah, and another thing I was gonna say, sorry.
Sure, that's fine.
I didn't do research, but as I was reading, I found interesting that he's giving us names of other places.
Right.
too. So I'll probably go back and read it, and then because it's always talking about gold. So I don't know.
Yeah.
I'll go back and do research on that.
It's interesting because, like I said before, they're not going to give you random things to be like, yeah, forget about it. We don't really care about it. It's going to pop up eventually. If they give you something, it's because it's going to come up again later on for us to make sure that we put those two words together. Like it says it in verse 5, it says it again in verse 10. What's the correlation between them two? Go ahead. Yeah.
So I'm going to give an example. It says Euphrates, and that river or place is mentioned a lot in the Bible. So I was just saying, like an example. Yeah, an example of yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I just it had a little because I know why the garden was. That's why I had that question of why is the garden important, because it gets reused again. That image gets reused again later on for other things because of what you were saying, like that's where it's like this where God's presence was at, and we'll see it later on in other stories where it was that God's presence was at. And one of the places was the tabernacle. And sorry, I just realized.
That's fine. That's fine. That's fine.
So in the tabernacle there was stuff that was gold.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the Garden of Eden, or in the garden,
Mm-hmm.
the name of the first is the Ishon. It wins through the entire land of Havilah where there's gold. So there it's telling you that there's gold, just like how there was gold in the tabernacle.
Right.
And then the other one, the other thing it says is aromatic resins. That's, remember they have the little scenty things. So it's interesting. I just now saw it.
And even says right there on verse 12, says, the gold of the land is good, right? But then later on we start seeing in different passages later on as far as in pretty much the Bible where they make a cow that's out of what? And so it's kind of like, if God's saying this is good, but then later on he talks about like deities and idols, you're not supposed to do it. And then they go back and say, well, if gold's good, I'm going to make it out of gold. But it's like, you're like contradicting yourself, you know what I mean?
That's man creating.
Exactly right. That's what I'm saying. Not God. Man is doing this as far as contradictions. Yes.
I just saw. I was looking
Yeah.
for it the whole time, and
Right.
I read it so many times. I
Skipped over it. Yeah.
Okay, so 15.
And I think the good thing about this, as far as like the rivers and everything else, maybe we don't see it again, maybe we will see it again, and who knows. But I think this is where pretty much a lot of times people want to say where they think they know where actual Eden was at because of what's actually going on, and that's why there's so much the war and everything else out there, is because they always think this is the holy place where it needs to be at. So just another thing as far as in this day and age, when they try to say, well, where is it at? Okay, we actually know there's certain kind of key characteristics there, and let's see where all four of them meet together to see what that's at. So, and also too, when you think about rivers, it also could mean too where like that, as far as like Adam and Eve, when they're there, they actually have fishes running through. That's more food for them to actually eat from and everything else. So it's kind of like they have a place where they have plants to eat from, right? The plants, the trees, and they also have the animals, and they have fish right there. They're not going to the ocean or something. It's right there with them that they can pretty much, choose from. So it's just another way for me. The way I did interpret it was like there's resources there for them to pretty much live peacefully. So, yep, 15, go ahead.
The Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to work it and take care of it. And the Lord God commanded the man, "You are free to eat from any tree in the garden, but you must not eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. For when you eat it, you will certainly die."
So, like I said before, any tree, all trees, it even says right there, pretty much the tree of life you can eat from.
I have a question.
Go for it.
Okay. So, yeah, you're probably going to add to it. Wait, what were you reading? 15?
15.
I'm so blind, guys. Hold
Just
on.
get closer.
Okay. It says, where is it? You are free to eat from the tree, but you must not eat from the tree. For you, when you eat it, you will certainly die. Okay.
Right.
What did they know about death? Like, I mean, at the time they were immortal, and I don't see anywhere where God before that ever told them, "Oh yeah, death is this."
There'll be
Like,
a time when you're gonna,
Mm-hmm.
your life will be non-existent.
yeah. So
Mhm.
like, oh yeah, this happens. Like, this is a thing, whatever. So how do they know what? When God told them, "You will certainly die." Like, okay, what is that?
Yeah. So I mean,
Yeah.
and that could be interpreted two different ways, right? It's kind of like, are they still like, let's just say their brains are too young to comprehend what that means, right? And it's like, yes or no, whatever the case may be. That is, everybody has their own standpoint on that one. But I think also what it means is just that God's just saying, you're gonna die, right? And obviously they haven't seen death yet, but as well, it's not like pretty much somebody's to say, hey, if your parent tells you what it can be, says, don't do this or else you're gonna fall down, you're gonna trip, you're gonna like cut your knee or whatever. It's like you're still gonna say, okay, they have my best interest, and I'm not gonna do this because they're telling me not to do it. I'm gonna make sure that I listen to them 100%, so that way I don't do what they're telling me to do, right? And so right there, they already know. It's not like it says, don't eat from your certain die, and then guess what? They eat from it right away just because. No, it's saying they understand that. That's what they already know. It's like that's the first thing that God tells them to do. Don't do this, right? Don't eat from pretty much the tree, or else this is going to happen to you.
I have is that the other one you have?
Go for it, yeah. Yes.
So the way that I was reading it was like, remember that the tree of good and evil is like the choice that when the man eats it, it's now they're deciding for themselves good and evil. And
Exactly right.
has any choices that men have made been good where they like, you know what I mean?
So pretty much like, let me see if I can change it. So pretty much, he says that you will certainly die, right? And Daisy's pretty much trying to say is that because you will certainly die, if you eat from it, now you're making the choice yourself that you're saying what is good and evil in your perception, right? So if somebody always tells you don't do this, you're gonna say, well, I think it's still okay to do it. I'm gonna do it because I know better than you what good and evil is. But in reality, you probably don't. And a lot of times, it mostly comes back to pretty much saying somebody has a best interest for you, but you still want to find out for yourself what that means. And you think people might be holding you back because of that, but in reality, they might have a best interest for you. And so,
yeah, and going back to it, it's like I think not that he's telling us, "Oh, I'm gonna kill you." In my mind, I'm saying like we ourselves are, because of our selfishness, because of
Right.
our greed,
Right.
Putting ourselves in that position.
yes,
Exactly right. Exactly right.
We decided to decide
For
to do
ourselves.
for ourselves.
Exactly right.
That's how I interpret it.
Yeah, because the knowledge of good and evil is not like, so when they were there, like you talked about before, as far as shame, and they even talk about the end of the chapter too, as far as shame. It's that you don't know what you're like. If you're a baby, you're an infant, right? And you're running around, let's just say, pretty much without a diaper. Like, do you know right then and there if it's good or evil for you to be running around and people to be seeing you like that? You have no idea. But later on in life, when you start getting older and everything else, you have an idea of what's actually good and wrong, as far as good and bad. And so, like what Daisy was saying earlier, because you don't know yet what it is, it's until somebody else tells you it's good and evil. It's pretty much somebody else telling you you're doing wrong. And that's when they become open and awake. And I mean, obviously, we're still talking about chapter 3 again, but to go back to the point, it's like it's your perception again as far as what good and evil is. And as soon as they eat from it, what happens? And we'll get to that again. We keep jumping ahead a little bit, but it's okay. It's all good. It's all good. Yeah, because
Go back to 3, then we should
No,
have a
never
better
mind.
understanding.
yeah,
Can I
more
say
questions
something?
too.
I feel like God, when they say you will certainly die, He didn't mean in a physical way. He meant like in other ways you're gonna die. Like you're gonna lose your house, you're gonna lose the perfect life you had, and you're gonna have to start all over again.
I mean, it's yeah,
You're setting
Bu-
yourself up for death.
but it's also too like so back then, all right. We're gonna read later on in different chapters. They lived long lives, long more than that, more than that. And so you get to a point where you say, well, it's not really physical death. Yes, it is because they didn't have a cap in the beginning. There was no cap for them as far as how long they can live for. So in reality, yes, one is spiritual death as far as what they try to do on their own, but at the same time, it's physical death as well when it comes to you want to do this? Well, now you have to suffer. And they talk about too as far as with Eve, what did she have to suffer? Exactly right. So it's not that like there's no physical consequences to it. There is, and we see that later on. So to your point, yes.
I didn't mean it like that. I just meant like die completely.
Yeah. But did they really die completely? They actually left God's presence. So I mean, is that not really a death right there? Maybe yeah, you didn't physically die, but you still decided to separate yourself so hard away from Him. So
18.
sorry.
The Lord God, we're almost done. The Lord God said, "It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable to him."
Hmm.
Now the Lord God had formed out of the ground all the wild animals and all the birds in the sky. He brought them to the man to see what he would name them. And whatever the man called each living creature, that was its name. So the man gave names to all the livestock, the birds in the sky, and all the wild animals. But for Adam, no suitable helper was found. So the Lord God caused the man to fall into a deep sleep, and while he was sleeping, he took one of the man's ribs and then closed up the place with flesh. Then the Lord God made a woman from the rib he had taken out of the man, and he brought her to the man. And the man said, "There is no bone. This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of a man. That is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh. Adam and his wife were both naked, and they felt so ashamed." These last two
Felt
ones,
no shame.
Yeah, these last two ones are just like, I don't know, they don't feel like they flow.
They're just out of taking it out of nowhere. I just finished up 250-word essay. Yeah. I think, yeah. And I think so. Let's go back a little bit, right? So let's go back to pretty much like verse 19, right, and 20. So now pretty much he's telling pretty much as far as man, because it hasn't given a name yet, to do what? Because now it's like the second thing God's trying to tell pretty much man to do. No, not yet. No, first not for man. Because remember in chapter 2, that's what he says. In chapter 2, he says, the first thing I want you to do is don't touch from this tree, right? Second thing he tells them to do is name all the creatures. Name them all. That's your job right here. It's just to name them. And remember we talked about what the creatures, what was their job? Just multiply and just pretty much live life, right? Just chill the whole time. So now we get to pretty much like to the rib. So why is it so important about the rib? Like when everybody always talks about the Adam's rib, why is it so important? And it's going to have a different interpretation. It's not a right or wrong answer.
Because she becomes part of him.
That she becomes part of him? Okay. But like, what does that mean though?
Like,
What?
why specifically?
Yeah. Yeah. Do you guys know? Okay. So then, I'll just go ahead. Okay. So then pretty much, yes, Daniel, go for it.
Because when the men and the women get married, son una sola carne.
We're getting there, but yeah.
That means that I always wondered this.
Okay.
And I may sound dumb, but I always wondered this.
It's fine.
but then people get divorced, so it makes no sense. But like that means that Daisy came out of you, like you and
No.
Daisy, like your rib.
So pretty much like the way that this was pretty much being made, right? So if God pretty much made Adam from the ground, right? Right. So it's different, right? So that's a whole that's this world things, right? But that's something else. So pretty much what he's trying to say on this one is that he made Adam from what? From the ground, right? From the dust, everything else. So why go make a woman out of dust again if you already have man? That's kind of like you do on your computer when you know that there's an answer right here. You're gonna just hit copy and paste. That's literally what he does. Exactly right. Why go back and recreate a whole new thing? What you're gonna do instead is say, "Hey Adam, you know what? I'm gonna take your ribs so you know that I made something that's part of you that you came from. So you can't say, where'd you make this? She's not mine. Because later on we're gonna see as far as what happens as far as in the tree is that whenever she goes and pretty much does something, it's still part of him. They are together. They're human beings. So it's not like human beings and an alien. No, it's pretty much you're both human beings. You both were created from the same thing. And also I created her exactly from you. So you guys, you like kind of like you can't complain about who this person is. She's exactly like you. I got straight from you and created pretty much woman, and therefore it's kind of like copy and paste. You don't have to say where she came from. You pretty much know it. You were here first. You see her. Now tell her about what's going on pretty much in this garden and Eden and everything else, right? So that's one part. That's kind of what to me like the rib why it's so important is because it's just to signify to him that he has a partner that's exactly like him. Exactly right. So now that we go pretty much, that says in verse 23, yeah. And he goes pretty much, now this is bone of my bones. So now pretty much Adam is pretty much saying, man said, this is now bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh, and she will be called woman, for she was taken out of man. So it's pretty much saying, she's exactly like me, flesh and bones and everything. So I know that this is the perfect person, because remember before it says, so in 18, and Yahweh Elohim said, it is not good for man to be alone, and I will make us a helper suitable for him. So he knows that man can't be by himself. That there has to, so if right now, and that's what pretty much you guys are talking about as far as the whole thing of like being together and everything else, it's like, if you know man is not supposed to be by himself, like he needs to have a partner. So it's kind of like you take one person, you divide it into two, so therefore they can be one. That's what they always talk about. It's because you have to start from somewhere. And if man can't be by himself, you have to make another one, so that way they can be united together. It's like talking about the Trinity was saying, all three of them together makes sense. If not, then it doesn't really make sense. Okay, sure. But for a couple, you need to have an actual pair to be united in one, so that way you can actually live and not feel, like verse 18 says, to be alone. Because if you are alone, it's not going to help you out. You have to have a partner in this life as far as, and that's what it's kind of like, does that make sense for you guys? Because that's what, for me, that's what it makes sense as far as, that's what they go back and they say, I think I have my notes right here, it says, Yahweh splits up man to make another, so now it's two people, and together they must unite to make one flesh. Go ahead. No, they're talking about other things. Talking about other things. Don't worry about it. Yeah, that's fine.
Or like not get married but still have kids.
Oh. Mm. It's not what it's saying.
But it says specifically
Yeah.
man to not be alone, but it doesn't say a woman to not be alone. Girl power. Like it says,
A man
a man
shouldn't
should be alone, but it
say
doesn't say a woman shouldn't be alone.
It says human, but yeah, man.
Wait, so if women not gonna get married, how are men gonna get married?
I think yeah.
Did you just say that women shouldn't get married and men should get married? So
My
why
mom
are men
said
getting
that
married?
God told us. No, I'm not saying that.
Yeah, he says it later on.
Yeah.
So pretty much saying, be fruitful and multiply. He gives us that command again. So it's kind of like, Because it's kind of like what life is to generate. I mean, he tells the animals to do the same thing, procreate and everything else to make more, so that way you can live on this world. So it's the same thing that, yeah, but it's the same thing as far as like for men too. I mean, it's for like for mankind is, I mean, if you don't have kids, and nobody has kids, then what's gonna happen? I mean, there's nobody else to pretty much keep going with the offspring. I wouldn't say so. It's just saying God is telling you you should. Yeah, I mean, you want to have a partner, but I mean that's everybody else. I mean, like, say if you have a partner and your partner dies, right? Should you go back and get remarried again? Now you're just opening up questions for a bunch of random things as well. But it's not so much to say yes you should or no you shouldn't. It just depends.
It's like saying you're about to get married and then you just die.
What?
No.
I have no idea what he said. I didn't hear. That's why.
Because like that could happen. You're about to get married and then you just die.
Just continue. How does that has nothing to do with it? I think it doesn't really specifically say that they should get married or like if they should have a partner. It just says it's not good. So guys, it's not good. But
They answered my question, okay?
yeah.
Y'all can continue.
So that's it. Let me just conclude that one. It just says it's not good.
It's not good,
But it's not saying it's not bad. But he's like, okay, I know it's not. It's
Mandatory,
Just, yeah, and it's
right.
not. And no, let me help. And then at the bottom, that's it. That's it. Go ahead.
Cool. Okay, so verse 24, right? So you guys are saying like this just seems like they're just trying to finish off something to make their essay to be 250 words. Is what it feels like.
I'm not thinking about it because Moses is the one that like was writing it, inspired by
Right.
God. I think that God's giving us here's what I did, and then for that generation that he was writing to, I think this is where he's like, this is why you like man should
Yeah.
be.
Because now he's pretty much giving another thing as far as to say, okay, look, I'm telling you guys, don't eat from the tree. Go name all the creatures. Now, don't be alone, right? You have a partner. And now the third thing's going to say pretty much is going to be, like, this is why the man leaves as far as leaves. Pretty much like, now that the actual kid, right, that you have becomes old enough, right, they should be able to leave and go get their own wife, right? Or even a woman, pretty much as far as a man, to get their own life so that way they become one as far as united and they have their own household. So now pretty much like Adam and Eve are going to have their own household. Now their kids need to move on their own to have their own household. If not, it's like you're going to stay together. I mean, that's what it says right there as far as so that way. And the whole point of 24 is what it's saying is that it's pretty much saying, like, you need to have a partner so that way you become one flesh. That's all it's saying. Not anything bad as far as you guys talking about, like, hey, you can't have a partner, what it can be. It's saying, like Daisy said earlier, it's easier with life if you're not alone. And two, if you're not alone, then you feel connected and you feel whole because now you're one. Right? So.
Yeah, you're not two separate entities. It's not Christian and Daisy. It's Christian and Daisy. One.
And I think, yeah. And I think the last thing too on verse 25, right? So, like you guys talked about, what was that word you guys said before? The last word that it pretty much says in chapter 2, shame. They didn't feel any shame. And like, why even put that down? So it's pretty much saying, I'm giving you this word shame. Yeah, innocent. So it's pretty much saying, I'm giving you this word shame. Now we're going to identify that later on. Those are just random sentences that are going to leave you where you have to pretty much find a way to connect it again. It's not just saying, oh, they felt no shame. Okay, cool, that's it. And then go reading, and then you have no idea what it means. It's telling you for some reason why it's there, because later on it's going to explain to you why. You know what I mean? So that's what I'm saying. Like, find those little things that pretty much make where you're going to connect it again to something else. And you see why they give it to you as far as in that format. Good. All right. You guys good? I think it's ready. So it's about 9.
Okay, I have a question, but
Go
this
for it.
goes like back to like
That's fine.
chapter 1.
Okay.
So it says that God created el cielo y la tierra.
Yeah.
But he doesn't mention anything about space. I've always wondered about
Oh, it's like
that.
universe?
Universe
Mm.
related. Yeah.
He does say he created the stars.
I think that's where the skies mean.
The
The vault and the sky. Yes. But I
But he does say
Also,
stars though,
It says
and planets are stars.
separated.
True.
I don't know what it
Right?
says.
Planets are stars. Whatever.
Yes, they start from a star. They pretty much grow. Everything else, yeah, it's different.
It said it put water under the ball and on top of the ball, the atmosphere. That means there was already space, right?
And then on top of that, it's like they didn't know about planets
Yeah.
back then. So when Moses was writing this, they don't really have like all the full technology that we have
Because
now.
it's like
So they're basing it on like
At that time frame, like you're not gonna have like, man, if you're like barely trying to like live to survive to not get killed by some ox that's just gonna run you over, like, and you have no hospital, nothing. The worst thing in your life is pretty much like, it's just to survive. And for us, like we survive so easily that we can just make all these other questions and observations that cause we're just
it's like
have
it's
more
all
to do.
thing that they also yeah, like the sun. We know now that the sun doesn't stop; it's the earth that stops, right? But back in the day, yeah. So that's where like like we know now so much
Yeah.
than what was
At the
written.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that's what they said about Jonah too. Remember, Jonah said it was a whale. Or they just said fish. They didn't even say whale. It's for us to be like, a fish can't eat them. Their fish are so small. But it's like we know now what it really is.
No.
No.
No, it was a fish, but like.
It doesn't
Yeah.
describe it 'cause
They just call it a fish because they didn't
Yeah.
they didn't name it like that. Yeah. They're just like, oh yeah, I think it's in the water. I mean, can a little trout eat a human? Just a big fish. Yeah.
Okay, since you went way back, I'm sorry, holding everybody. Since
It's all
you
good.
went way back, this is a very curious question because I'm not a fan of science. But is the Jurassic era real? Yeah. I mean,
Is
it's
it?
not in the Bible,
But it says
so it's not real.
But there's a lot of things that are not in the Bible.
And it wasn't like never mind. I'm just
It can't really be proven though.
well, I mean they found bones.
But like you can make bones, like you can.
I'll say this: if when we're actually trying to read it as far as in the Bible, right, our minds will start to get curious, right? And we talked about this earlier. It's kind of like, okay, Adam and Eve had pretty much like 3 kids. Okay, how did they go find wives, right? And they pretty much start to talk about. So Adam and Eve, right? They only talk about. They pretty much say, okay, they had 3 kids, 3 boys, right? And then they say later on, okay, Adam found a wife, and they pretty much lived as far as, and he, had kids and everything else afterwards, right? And they made his own city and all that other stuff, right? So our brains always go to the point of trying to say, where did the wives come from? What happened to this? What's going on here? But yeah, exactly. There's things that are mentioned in there for sure, but we always want to like have like this big like what's really going on. But I think what we need to really just go back to is just say what's in front of us that God's really just trying to give us.
Also, like there was something about Eric mentioned something one time. He mentioned something about like there was a third, like some historical book says that like there was like another wife from Adam in the garden. But that to answer his question. But to answer his question, I was like, the reason that maybe it's not mentioned, if it is, I don't know, I don't know. But hold on, let me finish my thought. But the point of the thing is like it doesn't matter because at the end of the day, the Bible was meant for us to be able to point. The Bible was created to point to Jesus. So was that story relevant to Jesus? So that's kind of like where I think about the things that sometimes we think about. Is it relevant to? Is it going to point us to Jesus or is it pointing us to somewhere else?
And also like what those stories, like what are they gonna give us as far as what kind of knowledge are gonna gain us? Like it's only gonna pretty much say that like you're only gonna start to say, I'm gonna question this, I'm gonna question that, I'm gonna question this, and then it's like where are you gonna be at? Exactly right.
Yeah.
So
But it's not really pointing to Jesus. It's kind of like
you're diverting away from it, and you're gonna start. That's what I'm saying. It's not really the best thing to do. It's like if you're saying like you guys are here obviously, and you're saying I want to learn more about God and I want to learn more about Jesus, then that's what we're doing. Exactly right. Exactly right. If or else kind of like what what your dad was saying too, as far as like the foundations and everything else, there was books put in place for us to read for a reason. If they had, as far as like the knowledge and understanding for us to actually learn from, that's why we have it. Not so much as to say, hey, we have all these other things going on. So, but yeah.
I think that's what the tree of life was for us to like, for it to be a path to Jesus, like, cause it was full
Right.
of God's spirit.
Yep. Yeah, and it's not gonna be the last time we talk about pretty much some kind of like tree of life. I mean, Moses does it on Mount Sinai, and there's other things as far as like the burning bush, everything else. So I mean, it's there's gonna be other times we keep talking about some kind of tree and some kind of hill.
Yeah, that's why we were like really trying to like read it so that you guys
Yeah.
can like see it.
You guys good?
Yeah, our bears are going.
Okay. All right.
Well, you
Thanks,
guys
guys.
have